Change. The word alone can be challenging. How do we get started? Where will the change lead? Don't sit there and worry about it. Be the change. Welcome to Be the Change Radio. Host Christina Bloom has been a professional psychic and spiritual advisor for 20 years, offering psychic and mediumship readings for individuals and groups. She also teaches several classes in psychic development and metaphysics. In addition, she is an author who has published 2 books so far and is the co-owner of Moonbow Publications and Productions, LLC. Are you ready for that change now? Here is your host of Be the Change Radio, Christina Bloom.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Be the Change Radio. You're listening to us on WLTK-DB.com. I'm Christina Bloom and I'm your host. I'm so glad that you've decided to join us tonight. This is the first of 5 shows for Medical May. We're going to be talking about different medical issues and how to treat them and different ways to treat them. I will be joined tonight by Dr. Matt Anderson, who's going to be talking with us about chronic illness and some ways that we can deal with chronic illness. But before we get to that, I wanted to go over something. Oh, wow, my grandson colored all over my notes. I love that kid. He's a fun. Good thing he doesn't like black things out completely. It's just circles and stuff. So anyway, here we go. On May 13th, I will be in La Crosse. It was on Alaska, but the show is now moved to La Crosse. And I forgot to write down the name of the hotel. Hi, Courtney. Hi, Rez. But it will be from 10 to 5, the Psychic and Wellness Fair in La Crosse. On May 20th, remember, it's Logan's Celebration of Life for anyone who wants to come to it. There is a Facebook event made for it. You can just look up Logan's Celebration of Life. All the details are there. And that will be at Broadhead Manor in Broadhead, Wisconsin, starting at noon and going until, I don't know. We don't have an ending time. So until we're through all of that, June 2nd, 3rd, and 4th will be a drum making retreat. And I added in the 2nd because people can come up anytime after noon Eastern time up to the Wild Blue Wander UP Rustic Retreat Center, and that is in Lake Linden, Michigan. The total cost for the retreat is $444. To make a drum, you are required to make a down payment of $150 for supplies before May 18th. And you can go to my meetup site. That's meetup.com/OneSpiritConnection, ONE Spirit Connection, and find all of the details there. I have also posted on Facebook, and it will be posted again on Facebook several times this week, next week, to give people time to do that. We only need the $150 down, which is fine, or you can pay the whole thing up front, or you can pay $150 down and the remainder of it when you get there. All right, let's see. June 10th is the Marinette, Menominee, Bigfoot, and Paracon. I will be there doing readings all day. That is at the Best Western Riverfront Inn in Marinette, Wisconsin. Barnaby Jones is the one who is putting this on. He had Monday Morning Monsters, for those of you who like to listen in here. Hi, Lee. Hi, Sherry. Welcome. The pictures. Yeah, we took a lot of really good pictures while we were up in the UP. Courtney just commented on that. I have the date wrong here. Let's see. We moved it to the 24th. June 24th is the Broadhead Manor fundraiser, and we are raising money to get a new roof on Broadhead Manor. It's a beautiful building, and right now we got some holes in the roof. Want to get those fixed. So there will be food, there will be entertainment. We're going to have live music. There's going to be all kinds of stuff. I'll be talking to Bill about that this week and getting something written up. We've got a lot of fun stuff going on with that. But just mark your calendars for June 24th, and we will be having lots of fun that day and raising some money for a good cause. Speaking of raising money for a good cause, our station is in a little need of an equipment upgrade, and we're doing a fundraiser for that also on GoFundMe. You can go on the station page, the Facebook page, WLTK-DB.com. I think it's in the group. It's probably on the group and the business page, but there is a post in there with, sorry, I shouldn't read comments while I'm doing this. Hi, Gail. Hi, Lee. And Tristan. Hi. So anyway, there's a GoFundMe link on the radio station's page. I know I've shared it on my page, and like 12 other people have shared it. We want to make sure that we can keep all this great programming on the air, and what the hosts pay in fees keeps it running, but not when there's an equipment failure. So we need to replace some equipment, and we're asking for people to help us out. Another way that you could help us out is to advertise your business, and you can go on the WLTK page and send a message to Todd Bates, and he can help you out with getting an ad up. And if anyone wants to put an ad up and wants to sponsor my show, that would be awesome. Then you would have your commercials playing through my show every week, which would be great. Would really appreciate that. All right. And then let's see, September 22nd through the 24th is a Great Lakes Paracon at the Haunted Glenbeulah School. We're going to have a lot of great people there for me. I know I'm going to be there. Diet Renee is going to be there. We have a Barnaby Jones is going to be there, and we're going to have, oh, wow, I can't even remember their names. Adam Barry is one of them. I think Aaron G. Thompson is going to be there, Nick Simons. So we're going to have a lot of people there whose names you might recognize. And it's going to be a fun weekend. I'm going to be doing one of the paranormal investigations with one of the other guests, or I guess hosts that are going to be there. I think we're calling us celebrities, which feels weird, but whatever. I'll be doing a paranormal investigation with one of those people, and I'm not sure who because they haven't told me yet. So it'll be really fun to just jump in and find out how that goes. And yeah, lots of big stars. Good evening, Jamie Lynn. I know Jamie Lynn's going to be there. She's super excited too. All right. So that's some of the stuff that's coming up. I mean, oh yeah. And there's going to be another Hiawatha Wellness Fair in Escanaba, Michigan on October 28th. I just found out today that has been scheduled. So come on up to Escanaba, Michigan. It's a beautiful area. We had so much fun. We probably had way more fun than we got work done, but that's okay because it was a blast. We all had fun. So that's going to be October 28th, and November 18th and 19th, I will be doing the Moonbow Metaphysical Expo in Saranac Lake, New York at the Hotel Saranac, known to be haunted. So that'll be a fun adventure. So if you are in the upstate New York area, stop on by there, get a reading, get a healing, do some shopping. I mean, some of these artists, wow. Absolutely amazing people. All right. And amazing artists too. Very, very gifted. And I think that's all I've got for announcements. So I want to bring out Dr. Matt Anderson again. And we're going to be talking about chronic illness today. And we're going to see where this conversation goes. Let's bring Matt out. Hi, Matt.
Hello.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Glad to be back.
Yeah, we had so many questions last time that you were on that we just had to do this again, but now we're going to do it again and again and again. So, which is awesome. All right. What do you have? Words. Words. Okay. So do you have anything, first of all, that you wanted to promote? I know you have a clinic going in Eau Claire. So
Yes. So I did recently open a second location in Eau Claire. It's called Vistara Health and Wellness. Vistara is how it's spelled. It's a Sanskrit word. And the website is vistarawellness.org. And so my focus there is physical therapy, and then also integrating with some energy work practices. I am also a Reiki Master Teacher.
Excellent. Excellent. Wow, 2 locations. How do you do that? I mean, that's a lot.
They're both unique. My other clinic is in Cameron, Wisconsin, right by Rice Lake,
Okay.
and that is much more of a traditional practice model, where we do accept insurance, and then it operates under the limitations of the insurance model in terms of what we can do with our practice. Where with this clinic, it is an opportunity to really customize to the individual and personalize it more to their needs and wants, without the limitations of the current medical model.
That's excellent.
Allows us to be more progressive, more integrative.
Excellent. I love it. Hi, Wendy and RJ. Hi, RJ. I'm sure you'd be happy to hear his name spoken on the radio. So, all right. So we are going to be talking about chronic illness and what that means and different ways to deal with it tonight. I think that's what we had decided on. So, first of all, can you define chronic illness, and give us some examples, maybe?
Sure. Well, chronic illness, chronic meaning long-term, ongoing. And it varies. The definition of that will vary based on what the diagnosis is. Some diagnoses are really what it comes down to is you have acute, meaning short onset, and more of a shorter period of time that the individual is dealing with these symptoms. Examples of that would be something simple like an ankle sprain, a back injury, a cold, a flu, things that life is good. It's not, you're experiencing some issues, but then in a relatively short period of time, these symptoms dissipate and you get back to regular life.
Okay.
Chronic illness and chronic conditions are things that they're extended. And many of these symptoms are going to continue over a period of time. Some chronic conditions do ultimately improve and you can heal and recover fully. Some may have more pronounced symptoms initially and then dissipate and become less prominent. And then there are certainly those that are going to be ongoing, and some, unfortunately, that are progressive. And not only will they be ongoing, but will become progressively worse. Things like that would be neurologic conditions, such as multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's disease, Lou Gehrig's ALS. Those are a few examples of some of the chronic conditions. And then another one that many of us are familiar with that we hear about is chronic pain. And when you look at tissue damage, whether it be from trauma, a car accident, surgery, any type of an injury, the standard healing time is really within that 4 to 6 week window. When you have damaged tissue, usually you see in the healthy individual that tissue damage is pretty well healed within that 4 to 6 weeks in most instances. When those symptoms persist after that time frame, then that's when you go into what's considered chronic.
Okay. Wow. That's a lot. All right. I just wanted to catch up here. Hi, Leanne. Hi, Gail. Hi, Casey. I hope I didn't miss anyone, but Casey was asking, disease of addiction, is this a chronic illness?
For many, yes. That really depends on the situation and in the individual. What many will look at addiction is an affliction where you're seeking a particular outcome from a substance, from an event, from an action, where ultimately the outcome has harm. And for many, it's a coping mechanism. And that coping mechanism can be such that we seek it in short term to deal with a short-term stress. Or it may be something where it's a coping mechanism for something that is going to continue long term, or just struggling with overall stress management, for instance. And that's maybe the go-to method of dealing with that. So addiction really can vary from anything from short term to long term. However, for most cases, I think many will find that it is a long term or chronic issue.
Okay.
If it were easy, it wouldn't be an addiction.
Right. Exactly. Whoever's doing dishes, hi. All I can see is Facebook user, but I'm glad you're here and I'm glad you're listening. Jamie Lynn says she has a chronic illness similar to MS. Do you work with people with MS?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And how do you, as a physical therapist, work with people with MS?
MS is very unique. So there are quite a few variations that you will see in the symptoms of MS. It's a neurologic condition that affects the brain specifically.
Okay.
And so the more common instances where physical therapists or people in rehab are going to deal with is those pain can be a factor, certainly, but often when it affects strength and movement. And it varies tremendously. I've had patients with MS where they've had very mild symptoms. One, I know he just had visual involvement, visually impaired. He still has vision, but it's quite reduced. And beyond that, he has no symptoms. And then I've had another patient where he is wheelchair bound. And MS also varies quite a bit too, where you can have mild symptoms. They can fluctuate, where you can have a flare and they can become much more significant, but then dissipate and improve, especially
Okay.
with medication. And then you can have others where it's a progressive, and when they do have an increase in symptoms, it doesn't reduce and then ultimately does become progressively worse.
Okay.
So much of it, in terms of PT, what I would be doing or physical therapists would be doing is trying to help maximize their mobility, their function, and minimize how it's limiting their daily routine and maximize their independence.
Okay. Oh, hi, Sharon. Well, Sharon's doing dishes. She said, can you see the comments?
I can.
Okay, so the second comment from the bottom, my chronic illnesses are, and then she puts a bunch of stuff in there I can't pronounce.
Sure.
So if you want to take that one.
Sure. So she has gastroparesis, so a GI issue, so a gut problem. IBD is irritable bowel syndrome or irritable bowel disorder, another gut issue. Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, that is a genetic connective tissue disorder.
Okay.
Median arcuate ligament syndrome, that there's definitely some overlap in the conditions. They all have to do with genetic issue with the connective tissue. Basically, what it is it lacks the structural integrity, where
Okay.
if these individuals have hyperflexibility, they're the ones that say, "Look what I can do," and everybody, shrieks, and they see their elbow
Yeah.
move way beyond what it should, or they can significantly hyperextend their knees. And so she's got a combination of some genetic things and then also some bowel issues that tend to have a greater stress component, and then in some cases an autoimmune.
Okay.
But sorry to see that. That's a lot. That's a lot for one person to deal with, and these are just one of those conditions is very challenging, let alone adding them all.
Yeah. Celiac trunk was severed during a routine gallbladder surgery, causing the MALS. And how did you say gastroparesis?
Gastroparesis, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that is a lot for one person to deal with, for sure. So I'm curious because you said MS affects the brain. So it really matters like where the brain is affected as to how
Yes.
it affects the person?
Correct. So it can affect different parts of the brain. So what MS does is the nerves have a coating around them,
Okay.
and it acts as an insulator. And think of it as like an insulation around an electrical wire. And
Okay.
what that does is it allows the signal to travel along that nerve more effectively, more efficiently. And then with our nervous system, the unique thing is that it's not just one continuous wire. There's breaks in that wire where that signal jumps from one to the next to the next to the next.
Right.
And what happens with MS is it's a demyelinating disorder, is what that's called, where that insulation actually starts to break down. And then it impacts how that signal can travel through. So when the person has the desire to raise their arm to brush their hair, instead of it just being an automatic movement where you just lift your arm and do it, no problem, they'll have some instances they'll have difficulty doing so, where it's like the arm just does not respond, or instead of being a nice smooth controlled motion, it'll be really jerky. Maybe they try to bring it to the top of their head and they go past it, or they hit themselves in the forehead. So it really varies a lot.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that information, because I feel like a lot of people, like, we just don't have this information available to us, and we could look it up and read it, but most of us are like, well, that was like reading a stereo manual, because we don't get it. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're not trained to understand all of that. And obviously Sharon is, because she knows all the words. So, having gone through it, I'm sure that she knows all the words. Jamie Lynn said that PT has given her life back. I'll just put it up.
Wonderful.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, 7 years ago, could barely walk. The lesions are predominantly on your cervical spinal cord. Okay. Yeah. Rabbit holes after rabbit holes with no full understanding, Courtney. Yeah, it certainly can be. I mean, for those of us who have never had to deal with these sorts of things, if we've never had a reason to learn all of this, then we don't know it. And Sharon says that she is a nutrition consultant and a Western herbalist and understands what's going on with her body. So having that training, I'm sure, was very helpful for her in understanding what's going on. So this might sound like a really dumb question, but in layman's terms, like, are there certain symptoms that kind of run across all chronic illnesses?
One thing that we do see is a very common presentation with a lot of chronic illness is inflammation.
Okay.
So that would be, and inflammation can come out in many different ways. One of the common ones is pain. It depends on where it is in the body.
Okay.
And in many chronic illnesses, especially as it continues over time, it just continues to affect more and more systems. It very much has a domino effect. So many will note just pain, for instance, and it can be local at first, and then it becomes more and more widespread, where instead of just their back, it becomes their upper back and their neck, and then it's into the shoulders, the legs, and everywhere hurts. And then when you have inflammation, another common area with chronic illness is in the gut. So the stomach, intestines, and all the organs involved in that. And then they'll start having a lot of issues with digestion. So upset stomach, vomiting, unable to keep things down, unable to keep things in, diarrhea, difficulty, constipation. It can go either way. And then it depends on what body system it involves. And as these things continue, especially if they continue unchecked and that inflammation becomes worse and worse, it tends to affect more and more things and becomes more and more severe and limiting.
Okay. Does that often affect sleep as well?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, as these things continue and have a greater effect on the overall balance of the function of our bodies, then ultimately there's not much that escapes it. And when everything is in struggle, then sleep is very difficult. Not to mention, when we are not feeling healthy, when we do not feel good, that brings a lot of stress and fear. Our health is something that we very much take for granted and we just expect because we know it to be normal. And we don't realize how upsetting and how much of a gift our health is until we don't have it. One of the things that I hear from my patients is, I had no idea how much I used my arm until it hurt to use it.
Yes, I can attest to that. Yes, I can definitely attest to that. Yeah. Jamie also says it affects mental health, having
Huge.
bouts of depression. Huge. Yeah, I guess because I had the more of an acute situation, I knew it was going to get better. But during that time that you're recovering and you're in pain constantly and nothing really gets rid of it, yeah, it takes a toll on your mental health. It takes a toll on just your brain in general,
Navigating the medical system is extremely difficult.
Yeah.
It's becoming more and more challenging, and that by itself becomes incredibly depressing and disheartening at times when you feel that you're alone and you're not getting the answers you're seeking.
Yes.
And how much more people have to be their own advocates and take an active role in their healthcare, which, I mean, there's benefits to that too. We should be active. We should be very involved in our healthcare decision-making process and not be passive.
Oh, I completely agree. Yeah. Handing over my health to someone else just doesn't make sense to me. I get that we need we need medical professionals sometimes. And when we need them, it's always good to know, how do I say it? Know how you feel and how you exist in your own body before you walk in there. Right now, my GP is amazing because she's like, you've been living in your body your whole life. I haven't been. You tell me what it feels like. And
That's
I love that.
wonderful.
I
Yes,
love that.
I hear that from my patients all the time, and I ask them, "What do you feel? And
Mm-hmm.
what are your concerns?" And many will share it, and then some will even share their theories, what they think is going on, and will say, "Well, I'm not a doctor," and I say, "Well, no one knows your body like you know your body. Only you
Exactly.
know your body." And never discount the value of that.
Yeah.
And we get incredible messages and information from our own bodies, and intuitively, often, many times, patients will give you the answers in terms of what's wrong. You just have to listen.
Wow. I wish more doctors understood that like you do. That would be amazing. So I popped up Keith's question here. Hi, Keith, by the way. Welcome. Is the insulation breakdown similar to aphasia?
So aphasia is a different symptom altogether. Aphasia, most commonly, we hear of what's called expressive and receptive aphasia.
Mm-hmm.
Those most commonly are associated with a stroke, and it affects a part of the brain that has to do with speech. Either the ability to understand and decipher the information that you're receiving in terms of what people are speaking to you, or your ability to communicate. And that has to do with damage within the brain, a part of the brain itself. So it's more than the nerves directly or the insulation around the nerves.
Okay. All right. Great. Great answer. Thank you. Hello, Jessica. Hello, Robin. We got Resin here again. We got Wendy in here. Thank you for explaining. I'll just pop that in there. Thank you for explaining the long-term effects of our entire systems. I'm dealing with constant pain from an ankle injury. The pain has spread along my spine from compensating. I thought I was being a wussy for being in pain. Wendy, no, honey. Your body compensates, and that's how it's supposed to work. But eventually, that it takes a whole toll on the body.
Absolutely. And one thing to recognize too is that pain is a very subjective experience, and no one has the right to define your pain but you.
Mm-hmm.
And pain ultimately is a message that you're receiving from your body. I talked about this a little bit last time when I was on, but there is no such thing as a pain nerve or a pain receptor. All that is, not all, but we have sensory information that our body relays to the brain. The brain receives this information, interprets that information, and it also interprets it based on prior experiences. And that's the calibration, so to speak, of the level of pain. And then what happens is then, based on that interpretation, decides what are we going to do with this? And how do we best protect ourselves? And then that ultimately is a big factor in what determines the level of pain or the significance of pain. And so it's a protective mechanism. What's challenging in chronic conditions, though, is the calibration of that pain can get skewed, where
Okay.
what will happen in some instances is light touch, for instance. If you were to take a feather and brush it across, Wendy's example, if we were to take a feather and brush it across her foot or ankle, intuitively, just instinctively, we know that that should not be painful. That's pretty benign.
Right.
However, in somebody that has this really heightened neurologic response, that may feel like taking razor blades across her ankle
Mm-hmm.
and be incredibly painful. And we could say, you know what, you're exaggerating. Come on, it's not that bad. But that's just the way that individual's brain is working. And so that pain experience is really personal, and it does vary. And there's so many factors that go into it. And it's also something that the physiology of pain and pain science as a whole, we've really made more strides within the medical community in the last 10 years than ever before collectively.
That's awesome. And that's really helpful for a lot of people. Hi, Luana, welcome. And Keith, other Keith, welcome. Thank you for being here. It's good to see everyone here. And you guys have some really great comments here. I really appreciate that. Courtney says, we created a bit. from what she understands, as far as pain goes.
In a way, in that sense, how we create it is, I would say that's more linked to the emotional aspect.
Okay.
Physical pain and emotional pain are intimately connected. When we feel physical pain, we often will feel emotional pain, and feeling emotional pain can also be felt as physical pain within the body. And so when an individual is struggling with their emotional state, it is not uncommon at all to also feel some physical pain with it. Pain also, again, is a major thing that goes with stress, and we do
Mhm.
a fine job creating stress in our lives.
I would say, yeah, 100%. Every adult I know creates their own stress, or at least contributes a lot to it. Yeah. Let's see. So here's another good question. So will pain memory affect current pain?
Absolutely. Um, there's a brilliant pain physiologist out of Australia whose name is Lorimer Moseley, and he's written extensively on this. And one of the experiences that he shared, a personal experience, was when he was in Australia going for a hike with a friend, and he felt something brush across his lower leg. And he thought, no big deal, it was just a branch. Onward he went. Next thing he knows, he lost consciousness and he woke up in the hospital. Um, and what had happened was, it was not a branch, it was a poisonous snake. One of the most poisonous snakes in Australia. And at the time, he was only one of a handful of people that even survived it.
Wow.
So pretty significant experience.
Yeah.
Now, fast forward to a few years later, he was going for a walk again, and he felt something brush against his lower leg. And he said had this sharp, shearing, intense pain, and he grabbed his ankle and he was jumping around, and he said he swore. And then he looked, and that time it was just a branch. It was just a scratch from a branch. So what
Okay.
happens is, when that information is conveyed to the brain from the senses, the sensory organs in our body, one of the things the brain does is, not only does it interpret that information that it's getting, but it also analyzes what happened previous. Have I experienced anything like this before? And when I did, if I did, what was the outcome? Well, the
Yeah.
last time he had that similar sensation, he nearly died. So then the brain says, whoa, okay, we're going to make this hurt bad in order to give him the incentive to remove himself from that dangerous situation.
That makes sense. So a cellular memory in some ways.
There's memory in many forms.
Okay.
One of the things, yes, there can be memory within the tissues themselves, absolutely.
Okay.
And that, especially our emotional experiences, are often held within them. And I wouldn't say often, they are. And there's
Mhm.
actually growing evidence to support this. Not just the progressive woo-woo fringe stuff, but I mean, there actually is legitimate scientific evidence that does support the notion of this memory being an emotional memory being held within the body, and then can be triggered in many forms. But one of the things that happens with our past experiences is, you can think of it where there's a file that's stored within the brain. And within that file, it's all the information that was pertinent to that experience. Anything from the sounds you heard, the music you listened to, what you could taste, what you could smell, what you felt. And then what can happen is, at any instant, any one of those pieces within that file can trigger opening the whole thing. Uh,
Okay. That
Another
makes
really,
sense to me.
yeah, and that can be one of those things like,
Yeah.
uh, many of us have food sensitivities. I used to, for instance, I used to love orange Kool-Aid. And one day I drank a whole bunch of it, and then I got really sick that night, and that's all I could taste as I was getting rid of the
Yeah.
orange Kool-Aid.
Got it.
So from that moment on, the thought of orange Kool-Aid makes me sick, and oh, I can't even imagine touching that. And I think everybody has those experiences.
Mhm.
Another one that was really interesting was an individual that was waking up every night in his apartment around 3 a.m. and he would have this severe back pain, and it was happening every day. When he wasn't outside of that time, he was overall doing okay, and couldn't figure this out, and went to seek evaluation for this. And ultimately, what they found out is, when they dug into it deeper, he did have a prior back injury. It was a work-related injury, and he worked in a commercial bakery. His apartment was above a bakery. At
Oh,
about
that's I
3
got it.
a.m., the baker started baking. He was
Mm-hmm.
waking up to the aroma coming from the bakery that triggered that relationship that then brought forth the experience of that pain or the association of that pain.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. I mean, I have read that olfactory senses are very strong as far as memory, as far as triggers, as far as that makes so much sense. This is a really fascinating conversation. We're going to come back. We're going to answer more questions, but first we're going to take a commercial break. Hey, everybody, welcome back. You're listening to Be the Change on WLTK-DB Talk Radio. And I'm here with Dr. Matt Anderson, and we are discussing chronic illness and all of the stuff associated with it. I don't even know how else to say that. There's so much associated with chronic illness that it is pretty amazing that like everybody I know, I mean, I'm in my 50s, so a lot of my friends are in the same age group, and they're like over 40, it's just pain every day. And I don't like that idea. I don't think it has to be that way. But a lot of people believe it, and a lot of people reinforce it for themselves and others. So I think that's where the mental obviously that's where the mental aspect comes in at it. But where do we get this idea? Like what is up with that?
Many things. One
Okay.
is societal expectations that aging is associated with decline,
Mm-hmm.
and that once you reach a certain age, there's accepted norms in terms of what you can or cannot do, or should not do. Uh, and that has really changed. I've been practicing for 15 years, and I'm amazed at what I see now versus what I saw when I first started practicing at the activity level and expectations of people of different age groups. Uh, and then another factor that too is just, unfortunately, it's what people hear from their doctors and medical providers, where I've had many that have gone in with concerns of, I hurt when I do this, or I used to be able to do all these things and now I can barely do this. And the response that many get was, well, you are getting older. You're not 20 anymore. You are 50, or 60, or 70, or 80. And I've never found that a satisfactory answer.
Neither have I. I just want to
Yeah,
put that in there. Yeah, I didn't find that satisfactory either.
just
Yeah.
because you're a certain age does not mean you must feel a certain way. And there is so much variation that we see in everybody in terms of how they feel and function. I've had 80 to 90-year-old patients that are doing incredible things. And then I've had people in their 20s and 30s that are extremely debilitated and extremely limited. So age by itself does not necessarily guarantee anything. And just because another factor that I share with people too is just because, yes, with aging process, there is decline in wear and tear within our bodies. If you look in the mirror at 20 and you look in the mirror at 60, you wouldn't expect the same reflection.
Right.
Things are going to look different. Things are going to change. At the same time, why would we expect that for our internal self? Why would you expect to see an X-ray at 20 and an X-ray at 60 and be surprised if you see arthritis or you see some wear and tear and degenerative changes. Just because you have wrinkles on your face doesn't mean you can't be a person
Right.
or have anything
Right.
to offer. So just because you have arthritis in the knee or you have degenerative changes in your spine does not in any way guarantee that you're going to have pain and debility where you can or should not do things. There are situations where there is a correlation in terms of degenerative changes or wear and tear where the person is having pain and they add up and they complement and that it starts to make sense of what's going on. And then those are times where where it is appropriate to do things about it, such as those that have a knee replacement or a hip replacement or those that do have surgery on their spines. But just having a pain experience or struggling to do something and then doing imaging and saying, well, you've got arthritis, you have wear and tear, that does not mean that's the cause. That does not mean that's the problem. It's easy to look at it that way and blame it on that and dismiss it as such,
Mm-hmm.
but it's often not that simple. There's a
Right.
very small subset where it is.
Okay, that's good to know. That is good to know. And as I have said before, I have wrinkles, but they're not painful. It's okay.
And we earn those wrinkles.
And the gray hair and the scars, we've earned them, and that's okay. Let's see. Keith Johnson has a question, but we'll get back to that in a minute. Keith Fletcher says, so very true. And it also of how you feel to and see yourself too. Yeah. Christine says, thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Christine.
I think your answer was very helpful for her. Do you feel like tackling a past life question?
Why not?
All right, here you go. There it is.
What past life injuries affect current lives? That is a great one. And that's an area that I have, and certainly pursuing the studies of Reiki and then spirituality in many forms, it does open the door to what it is to be in spirit form and what that can mean and what that encompasses in terms of our current incarnation or the notion of reincarnation or past lives. There are individuals that are trained or have pursued advanced training in working with this more. That certainly that's not my area of expertise. You had Kim Pomeroy on here not too long ago, and that is an area that Kim is with Indigo. Oh my gosh,
Indigo Waters.
Indigo Waters. Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, Kim. I know better.
Sorry, Kim. I knew too. I didn't mean to say it like a question.
Yes, Indigo Waters. So Kim does a lot with working with the person at soul level and looking into past life experiences. And there is a lot of documentation of how past life trauma can come into current life situations. It does come up with in Reiki sessions as well for those that do have more intuitive communication. So is it accepted, documented, and known within the scientific literature in allopathic Western medicine? Absolutely not. However, there are many others that feel very strongly of it and have much to offer. And I try very much to be open-minded and not dismiss anything. And we don't know what we don't know when it comes down to it. And the scientific method has much to offer, but it is not perfect. There are limitations and it cannot validate, prove, and support everything. But just because there are situations where that method doesn't work, it doesn't discount the value of what may be there.
Right. I agree. And I work a lot with past lives and Akashic records and that sort of thing. And I have found a lot of correlations between what someone is struggling with in this lifetime and how it connects to other lifetimes. And so that was a really good question, Keith. Thank you for asking that question.
Excellent question.
It was good to get another perspective on that too, which I always appreciate. All right. I don't know if there are any more questions in here, but I was going to write down a note and then I got distracted because I had a question and now I'm trying to remember what it was. It had to do with chronic illness, I believe. And I want to try to remember what it was, but it was like, is there a list of diseases that are considered to be chronic illnesses?
Yes, many.
Okay.
And it varies so much. One of the things that is really gaining a lot of attention in terms of chronic illness is autoimmune disorders.
Yeah.
This is actually something that is viewed as an epidemic within the Western culture, and it's really spreading beyond that. It's not just unique to the Western world, but there is a tremendous increase in autoimmune disorders, and more concerningly, it's 8 to 10 times more likely in women than men.
Interesting.
And much of that is believed to be associated with stress. And with women generally assuming the role of caregiver of their families, and with that, it's not just being in the caregiving role, but it's being in the caregiving role where they're more prone to take on these stressors of their family members, loved ones, friends, and then often sacrifice their own needs and their own self-care. And then that's what really sets up the condition to where these autoimmune disorders can develop.
Right.
And where much of that comes from has to do with the balance of our nervous system. When we look at the nervous system, there's two primary divisions. There's what's called the central nervous system, that's our brain and spinal cord,
Mm-hmm.
and then the peripheral nervous system. And our peripheral nervous system is everything outside that. So all the nerves that run through our body.
Okay.
And a key piece of this is there's something that's called the autonomic nervous system. And the autonomic nervous system, many are familiar with the notion of the fight or flight.
Mm-hmm.
And that falls within the autonomic nervous system. So there's two divisions. There's one that's called the sympathetic, and then there's the parasympathetic. The sympathetic is your fight and flight. That is, it's when we encounter stress, and it's our body's ability to protect and remove ourselves from danger, and how that changes the process and the balance of things within our body. So examples would be if you see a lion coming your way, chances are you're not going to say, "Here, kitty, kitty."
I know some people who would.
They look cute. It's tempting,
do.
but I don't think they're the
They're
best
fuzzy.
cuddlers. And so then what will happen is there's this instantaneous change within our bodies. Things such as blood flow is directed to our muscles, and our heart rate will increase. The heart will beat faster and more forcefully to mobilize that blood to our muscles, so that we can have the superhuman strength to remove ourselves from that danger.
Right.
When that happens, the other thing that will occur is it will pull blood from non-essential functions such as our digestion. It's far less important to digest that wonderful protein shake you just had versus getting yourself away from the angry kitty.
Mm-hmm.
So those are some of the things that happen. Now, the parasympathetic is the opposite. That's regarded as the rest and digest. So in those instances, heart rate slows, the contraction of the heart minimizes. Question: if I was a baby lion, I would.
I know. I was trying not to laugh at that. Thanks.
But with with the parasympathetic nervous system, and then it counters the effects of the sympathetic. And ultimately, what's important for optimal health is these two systems to be in balance.
Okay.
That fight or flight is, again, that's the protective mechanism to remove ourselves from danger, and it really influences every single system within our body. And the commonality in all of this is the neurologic communication that directly influences every single system. What happens in chronic illness and chronic conditions is the balance of this gets skewed. And what happens is the stress response is facilitated. So that sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight, and our body is in this constant state of arousal, of being ready for an anticipation of that danger. And it affects the hormones and the stress hormones and stress chemicals that are released within our body that impact every single system, including our immune system.
Mm-hmm.
And when we have this constant stress message sent throughout the body, what it does is it does inhibit the immune system. So that by itself makes us more susceptible to illness. When we're stressed and tired and worn out, that's when we get sick most frequently.
Absolutely.
But then what can also happen is when our body is bombarded with this constant stress response and this constant threat, is there can be this autoimmune is actually, it's not fully determined what this all is and how it works, but essentially what happens is think of it as an army, and our body's the castle. The
Hmm.
army's job is to protect that castle and fight off the enemy, that enemy bacteria, viruses, colds, so on. What can happen though is in the cases of autoimmune disorders is the army loses sight of who the enemy is and can
Okay.
begin to attack the castle itself. And that's when you develop autoimmune disorders. The area where we're seeing that come up the most is in the gut and digestive issues. That's one area that's really growing. Things like irritable bowel syndrome, for instance, Crohn's disease, celiac disease.
Okay.
And so then people are having a tremendous amount of gut issues. Well, if you're having a lot of gut issues, you're not getting good nutrition. If you're not getting good nutrition, none of your systems are going to work properly. This heightened stress response then will also affect our sleep because of the hormones related to it. And cortisol and adrenaline are two big things that we hear of that come from the adrenal gland above the
Hmm.
kidneys. And what happens there then is our body is in this constant heightened state, and it does not allow rest, and it impacts our sleep. And if we're not resting and we're not sleeping, it significantly impairs our body's ability for healing
Hmm.
itself, and just the natural process that needs to occur to be healthy.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. Um, Smart man. I agree with all of this and speak this way as well. Attaboy, Matt. Pretty
Thank
sure
you.
that's Sharon, but her name isn't up there. So Keith had another question. Is chronic illness genetic? And I know that in some cases there's a genetic component, but is that true in all cases?
Not at all.
Okay.
Genetics is a fascinating topic too, and I could go on and get very geeky and technical here, and I'll spare you that. But uh, one individual that I just am absolutely fascinated with is Deepak Chopra. So
Hmm.
he's a medical doctor, but he's very, very progressive. And he shared a stat on genetics in terms of illness
Okay.
and specifically cancer. And there's evidence now that shows that less than 5% of all illness is directly linked to a genetic predisposition, or that we can attribute it to, if you have this genetic presentation, you are going to get this outcome. Less than 5%.
Okay.
So the majority are all associated with lifestyle. And this has led to a separate field called epigenetics, and another fascinating area. And epigenetics has to do with the environment. And what it looks at is genes are nothing but a blueprint. It's a blueprint it's the building blocks of what can become, what can manifest. However, it's the interpretation and the expression of those genes, of that blueprint, that ultimately is going to determine the final product. If you think of it as an architect, and you look at an architect creates a blueprint. A blueprint is ultimately the structure, say it's a house.
Hmm.
And the architect designs the house. Here's the plan. Here it is on paper, gives it to the builder, the contractor, and the contractors go out and actually construct this thing. The end product is going to be based on what the contractors do with those plans. The plans themselves are not the direct determinant of the final product. There's so many things within the environment, including the building materials, the weather conditions, and so on, that can have a tremendous impact on what you ultimately are left with. And our genes are the same way. And that's something that's really, really changed. For quite some time, physicians in medical school were taught that genes are everything. Genes determine every single expression. But going back into the 60s and 70s, there's some fantastic studies that have shown that's just simply not the case.
Okay, great.
So ultimately,
Thanks
what does
for
that mean? Oh, sorry.
yeah. I was
But
going
what
to
is,
say Keith is checking out. Keith Fletcher lives on the East Coast, and he checks out early every night because he has to get up early the next day. So have a good night, Keith. Thanks for joining us. Sorry, go ahead, Matt.
No problem. It's your show. But what does that mean is that ultimately we have so much more control in our own health than we realize. And that's really
Mhm.
something that's unfortunate, that that control, that power has been taken from us in terms of how how the healthcare system operates, where again that goes to the more passive nature of, I know something's wrong, here you fix me, you tell me what I need, you tell me what to do. And in reality, there is so much that we can do for ourselves, but much of it comes with understanding what's going on and what to
Mhm.
do about it. So
Yeah.
ultimately, we need those that empower and listen and empower, and make you and contribute to coming up with a plan of how you can directly improve your own health.
I love that. I love that. And yeah, I decided a number of years ago that my body was mine and I was going to direct my health care. So
We only get one.
yeah, well, one at a time anyway.
That's right.
Casey said the anatomy of the spirit is extremely helpful with related body illness and why. And yeah, that was a really, really good book. I read that when I first started stepping into the arena that I'm in now. That was a really good book for me to read. Yeah. He is talking to me. Listen, listen. One at a time. I freaking love you. Courtney's the best, man. She's like, she gets some sort of award, I swear. All right. Um, Keith says 5 minutes, and the other Keith that's left now, Keith Johnson, says 5 minutes and counting. Um, if anyone else has a question, I did see one here. Okay. I'm going to let you just read that one. It gets psychic, not physic, but
Yes. Do you know how chronic conditions affect psychic and mediumship abilities? For example, type 1 diabetes and Crohn's disease. In order to be most in tuned to intuitive communication, what you will hear from those that engage in these practices is that the ability to ground and center is of extreme importance.
absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
And any type of illness and chronic condition is a tremendous distraction, and it makes it so much harder to focus and concentrate. Anybody that's meditated, if you're trying to clear your mind and focus on one specific intention and you're having significant pain, it is one heck of an intrusive continual message that takes you away from your focus. And going into any type of spiritual communication, in connecting to any higher level of anything, changing your vibrational awareness requires a lot of focus and concentration. That's the art, that's the skill, that's what comes from the practice. It requires a lot of focus, and any of these chronic conditions challenge our ability to focus.
Absolutely. I know when you're in pain, it's really hard to focus on anything, headaches especially.
And when you don't feel well,
Yeah. Oh, here's the page I was looking for. Yeah. We have just about 2.5 minutes left. Was there anything that you're feeling compelled to share with people at this point?
from my experience, uh, and this is something that's finally improving and is coming into mainstream medicine or Western medicine, is the recognition that the approach has been incredibly segmented and compartmentalized, where we look at things in isolation. And if you go with a concern, we look for a specific label, we look for the specific part, and we try to separate that from the person. And that is just not how we work. We are a system in its entirety and need everything to work in harmony in order to have
Mhm.
optimal health. And furthermore, one of the issues that is grossly underappreciated is the notion of, we have the physical body, we also have the mental and emotional body, and then we have a
Mhm.
spiritual body. All three must work together in order to have optimal health and function. We cannot separate them. In doing so is a tremendous disservice and a major factor that contributes to chronic illness, and certainly
Mhm.
conditions that become progressively worse by trying to isolate and take things away and not look at the integration of a whole.
Awesome. Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. That is really good information. And one more.
Any suggestions on how to better ground and connect with chronic disease? Intention is everything. So really, it's taking those moments to certainly be as comfortable as you can be, engaging in self-care, things that really bring you peace, that bring you joy, and focusing on that feeling, focusing on that awareness and bringing that to the forefront. When you do so, it makes it a lot easier to be selective on what you're going to give your attention and pay your focus to. We have a notion of external and internal currency. External currency is the money that you spend to buy things, for instance. Our internal currency is our attention. Where are you going to spend your attention? That is the greatest thing that we have to work with. When you choose to put that with a particular attention and try to quiet the things around you, that's what's really going to help you better ground. And much of that has to do with just breathing, just focusing on your breath, bringing all of your awareness to your breath in just nice, deep breaths. You will find that that can do wonders for grounding.
Right. Yeah, I love that. And having had a chronic lung condition for years now, I do deep breathing every day because it's what keeps my lungs working. I mean, physically, that's my reason. Of course, I have, spiritual and emotional reasons as well. But that it's kind of funny when I'm listening to guided meditations and they're like, take a deep breath, now release. And I'm not even done taking the breath in yet because I'm already up to a count of like 15 or 20, right? Because I am not losing lung function. I don't care. I'm going to keep my lung function. So I just find that interesting. And other people are like, wait, you're going too slow, you're going too fast, or, so yeah, that's interesting. She says, thank you. It's hard even with chronic RC controlled. I don't know what RC is, but you probably do.
I'm not sure.
Okay. Somebody said something. Okay. Wendy had said, very interesting. I travel in quotation marks with my son. So meditation. I'm very distracted from our journey here due to my pain. Yeah. Pain is distracting. Pain is really, really, really distracting. And for anyone who's been experiencing it, it can be really difficult.
It's distracting. But one thing to also remember is that pain is a message. And if it's distracting, are you receiving that message? Right. And really spend some time with that and trying to figure out what is the origin of that pain, what's going on, what is your body trying to tell you?
Right, exactly. And there you are. Just thought I'd pop that up for you.
Thank you, Audrey.
Yeah, Audrey is going to be our guest on the 15th. So
definitely don't want to miss that. Audrey's wonderful.
Yeah. She is, and she's funny. So that helps. So next week, we're going to be talking about autoimmune disorders, oncology. We have not yet confirmed the guest, but we will have a great guest for you next week talking about that. Matt is going to be my co-host for the month of May. So Matt will be back with us next week as a co-host, and we will have another guest as well. And Keith, it's the 15th of May. I'm talking about everything I'm talking about right now is May, medical May. So we will be covering a whole bunch more stuff in the next 4 weeks, a whole lot of medical information. And I am really honored that you have agreed to do this with me because you understand what they're talking about. So I appreciate it.
I'll do my best. And it's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Everyone have a great week. And we will see you next Monday.
The truth is here and now on WLTK-DB Talk Radio at WLTK-DB.com.